You check your account balance again. Same as yesterday. Same as this morning. You've done the math 100 times. You've read the blog posts. Watched the calculators spit out green check marks. Maybe even told a friend I think I could actually do this. And then, at 2 a.m., the doubt creeps back in. What if the market crashes the year after you quit? What if healthcare costs eat you alive before Medicare kicks in? What if you're wrong and there's no going back? Here's the uncomfortable part. Nobody tells you. Most people who could retire early never do. You've read the blog posts, watched the calculators spit out green check marks, maybe even told a friend I think I could actually do this. And then, at 2 a.m., the doubt creeps back in. And the smaller group who shouldn't retire early do it anyway, because a number on a spreadsheet told them it was time. The number was never the real test. And here's what I eventually figured out. I'm not a financial advisor. I don't manage money for a living, and I definitely don't have a corner office. What I do have is a spreadsheet I've been obsessively updating since my 30s, a stack of regrets from decisions I made too fast, and a habit of reading everything the Federal Reserve, Fidelity, and Vanguard publish, so I don't have to learn things the hard way twice. I don't manage money for a living, and I definitely don't have a corner office. I used to think retiring early was purely a math problem. Save enough, hit enough, walk away. I was wrong. The math is maybe 40% of it. The other 60% is stuff nobody puts in a spreadsheet. And that's what actually separates the people who retire early and thrive from the people who retire early and quietly go back to work 18 months later. Let me introduce you to two people. Call them Mark and Denise, both 45. Both live in mid-sized American cities. Both earn around $95,000 a year. Both have roughly $650,000 saved between their 401k and a brokerage account. On paper, they are the same person. Mark quits his job 14 months from now. Denise waits 3 more years. By the time they're 55, one of them is thriving, traveling, relaxed, sleeping fine. The other is back in a cubicle, embarrassed, explaining to coworkers why the retirement didn't stick. We're going to find out which is which. First, you need to understand the one thing that separates them, because it isn't their bank balance. Think of retiring early like a pilot, preparing for takeoff. There's a moment on every runway called VON. It's the speed at which a pilot stops being able to safely abort. Below VON, you can hit the brakes and stay on the ground. Above VON, you're committed. You're taking off whether the plane is ready or not. Most people treat their number like VON. The second they hit it, they gun the engine and take off. But a good pilot doesn't just check their speed. They check fuel, weather, instruments, weight distribution, a dozen signals that all have to line up before that plane leaves the ground. Retiring early works the same way. Your savings number is just one gauge on the dashboard. Today we're checking the other 5. Let's start with the gauge everyone stares at, the money. Americans think they need $1.46 million to retire comfortably in 2026, and that figure keeps climbing every year. But that number was built for a 65-year-old retiring into Medicare and a full Social Security check. It was not built for someone quitting at 45, 50, or 52 with 15 or 20 extra years to fund before those safety nets even turn on. This is where a lot of early retirement dreams quietly crash. People borrow the traditional retirement, apply it to an early exit, and don't account for the gap years, the stretch between the day you stop working and the day Social Security and Medicare actually show up. Sign number 1. Your number already accounts for the gap years, not just the finish line. If your plan only covers you until 65, and you're planning to retire at 50, you haven't built a plane. You've built one wing. Here's where Mark went wrong. Mark ran the classic 4% rule. Take your savings, withdraw 4% a year, adjust for inflation, and historically that money lasts 30 years. On $650,000, that's $26,000 a year, plus whatever part-time consulting he picks up. Sounds solid, except the 4% rule was built on 30-year retirements. Mark is 45. If he retires now, his money may need to last 45 or 50 years, not 30. That's not a small adjustment. That's a completely different flight plan. Denise did something different. She ran her numbers against the worst 10-year stretches in market history, the early 1970s, 2000 to 2010, and checked whether her plan survived those, not just the friendly average years. Sign number 2. You've tested your plan against bad decades, not good ones. Anyone's plan works in a bull market. The real question is, does it survive if the first 5 years of your retirement look like 2008? Let's talk about the gap that quietly wrecks more early retirements than market crashes do. Healthcare. Medicare doesn't start until 65. If you retire at 50, you are personally responsible for covering 15 years of healthcare costs on the private market or through the ACA marketplace entirely on your own. This is the part people skip because it's boring and stressful to think about. But it's often the single biggest line item in an early retiree's budget, sometimes larger than housing. Sign number 3. You've priced out real health insurance costs for your actual age and state, not a national average from a blog post. If your entire healthcare plan is, "I'll figure it out," that's not a plan. That's turbulence waiting to happen. Let's make this real with numbers, because vague reassurance doesn't pay medical bills. Say you're 48. You retire with $800,000 invested. Year 1. Withdraw $32,000. That's 4%. Market return 7%. Your balance, after withdrawal and growth, actually grows to roughly $822,000. Let that sink in. In a good year, you can spend money and still grow your nest egg. Year 2. In a bad decade scenario, market drops 15%. You still need $32,000 to live. Your balance falls to roughly $661,000, a nearly 20% hit in a single year on top of what you already withdrew. Read that again. This is why the sequence of returns, not just the average return, is what actually determines whether your early retirement survives. Two people with identical average returns over 30 years can have wildly different outcomes depending on whether the crash happens in year 1 or year 20. Now, compare that to someone who kept working into their mid-50s, whose average retirement savings by that age climbed toward roughly $500,000, with those aged 55 to 64 averaging over $537,000 nationally. That extra decade of contributions and compounding isn't just about having more money. It's about having more room to absorb a bad 5 years without panic. Think about that for a moment. The extra years aren't wasted time. They're shock absorbers. Here's what nobody talks about. Early retirement isn't primarily a money problem. It's an identity problem wearing a money costume. A huge number of people who retire early aren't actually retiring. They're fleeing. Fleeing a job they hate, a boss they can't stand, a version of their life that feels finished. And they mistake the relief of leaving for the readiness of arriving. The math can be perfect, and the person can still be miserable 18 months later, not because the spreadsheet was wrong, but because nobody built a spreadsheet for Tuesday afternoons. What are you actually going to do with 3,000 extra unstructured hours a year for possibly 40 more years? This is the moment worth sharing because almost nobody says it out loud. If you can't answer in one sentence what a normal Tuesday in your early retirement actually looks like, you are not ready, no matter what your account balance says. The math can be perfect, and the person can still be miserable 18 months later, not because the spreadsheet was wrong, but because nobody built a spreadsheet for Tuesday afternoons. So how do you actually survive this phase? The waiting, the doubting, the am I close, yet anxiety that eats at you for years before the actual decision. I think the honest answer is that you stop treating readiness as a single finish line and start treating it as a checklist you revisit every year. The math can be perfect, and the person can still be miserable 18 months later, not because the spreadsheet was wrong, but because nobody built a spreadsheet for Tuesday afternoon. 3 things that genuinely help. First, build a bridge budget, not a dream budget. Write down what your first 3 years actually cost, not what you hope they'll cost. Boring, specific, itemized. Vague optimism is where early retirements go to die. Second, run a trial year while still employed. Take a real unpaid month off if you can, or track spending as if you'd already quit. You will learn more about your real habits in 30 days than in 30 spreadsheets. Third, give yourself permission to move the date. The people who struggle most are the ones who treat their target date like a promise they made to the internet. It's not. It's a hypothesis. Hypotheses get updated, And if you're feeling behind compared to whatever timeline you set 5 years ago, that's not failure. That's just new information. Only about 35% of Americans currently feel on track for retirement at all. So if you're even asking these questions seriously, you are already ahead of most people who never ask them at all. If you're in your 30s or early 40s dreaming about early retirement, your action step is to automate an aggressive savings rate now, above and beyond your 400 neck match, into a mix of Roth IRA and taxable brokerage accounts. Taxable accounts are what actually fund your gap years before you can touch retirement accounts penalty-free. Only about 35% of Americans currently feel on track for retirement at all. So if you're even asking these questions seriously, you are already ahead of most people who never ask them at all. Your mindset shift. This isn't deprivation, it's runway building. Every dollar you save at 35 is worth roughly 4 times what the same dollar saved at 55 will be, purely from decades of compounding. If you're in your 50s eyeing the exit, your action step is to build a detailed healthcare and bridge year budget this year, not the year you plan to quit. Price real IRA plans for your state and age. Your mindset shift. You don't need a perfect number. You need a tested number, one that survived a bad decade on paper before it has to survive one in real life. If you are in your 60s or a late starter, wondering if early retirement even applies to you anymore, your action step is to look seriously at delaying Social Security, since every year you wait past your full retirement age adds a meaningful percentage to your monthly check for life. Your mindset shift. You don't need a perfect number. You need a tested number, one that survived a bad decade on paper before it has to survive one in real life. Your mindset shift. Early retirement isn't the only win. A retirement that's secure at 66 beats a retirement that's early and shaky at 58 every single time. Back to that runway. A pilot doesn't feel bad about checking 6 instruments instead of 1. They don't call it doubt. They call it professionalism. Checking your healthcare plan, stress testing your withdrawal rate, pricing your gap years, and being honest about your Tuesdays. That's not fear talk. That's you finally flying the plane instead of just staring at the fuel gauge and hoping. Mark took off at 1 with half his instruments unchecked. Denise waited 3 more years, checked everything, and landed exactly where she wanted to be, steady, funded, and never once forced back to a job she'd already left behind. You don't have to choose the earliest possible exit. You have to choose the exit you never have to reverse. If this helped you think about your own runway a little differently, you might like the video where I break down exactly how to stress test a withdrawal rate against real bad decade market data. Links right there. And if you're not sure where you actually stand, drop your age and target retirement year in the comments. I read everyone.